Hello, hello. Welcome to the December Live podcasting for financial professionals, where we answer your questions all about podcasting for business so that you are attracting the right ideal clients and converting them into leads and eventually business for to support your business. So thank you for being here. We are currently live on YouTube and LinkedIn. Just a second here. Okay, so if you happen to be joining from LinkedIn or YouTube, thank you so much for being there. If you want to join me inside Restream and post your question and get it answered live inside the platform, I'm going to invite you to hop into Restream. The link is below this video in the description. I'm actually just going to click, yes, it is inside the YouTube description and inside the LinkedIn description for this event. So you can comment away, share, and post within YouTube or LinkedIn. I will try to hop over there and see your questions during the live, but if you want your question for sure answered today live with me in this session, hop into the Restream studio. It is linked in the description. And with that, we are going to get started. I have 5 questions that I have hand selected for today's session because of the conversations that I've been having lately with some really mature podcasters who have been podcasting for their business for 3 years, 5 years, maybe longer. And they've started to feel like they were just on another hamster wheel and just chugging away and just producing episodes, even up to daily episodes. And when you step back from that and you kind of pull your mind out of the grind for a moment, you're thinking, like, what am I even doing? What is the strategy here? Like, are these episodes driving traffic to my offers? If not, how do I change that? Right? So that encompasses the idea of where these 5 questions came from. It's from those type of conversations. So the first one, a lot of people start to wonder after they feel like they have a pretty good library of content that they've created. And it's kind of the question around, look, my podcast has created an audience. There are people that email me about my episodes and say, hey, that was a great episode this week. I really appreciate it. It impacted me, blah, 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 right? So you have an audience. You can see your podcast listener numbers in your dashboard. But regardless of all of the interaction and nice comments and emails back, you're not seeing the transition from a listener into a client in your business, right? Like a paid offer, whether or not the person says, like, I found you because of your podcast, or maybe they found you and then listened to your podcast to really build trust and decide that they want to buy from you. But that's the gap that a lot of my work fixes. So if you feel like you've built an audience, but you're not seeing that audience transition into paid business clients, right? What's missing? So some of the things that I see that are missing all comes down to strategy. And this is a lot of what we do inside my strategy sessions, inside the podcast conversion lab. So we walk through like all the elements of your podcast, whether we're breaking down your intros, your commercials, your outros, your actual content, who you're speaking to on your podcast episodes, like your guest. Are those guests ideal for your clients? And is your conversation with those guests leading these listeners toward doing business? So a lot of times when we think about our content, we are, as podcast, I'm saying we, as podcasters, we are trying to teach and convey certain concepts and even share ideas around what solutions our business provides in an attempt to attract those clients, right? But a lot of times it's really helpful to kind of step out of that teaching phase and really look at your ideal client, their life stage, their income, like all the demographic type stuff. But then think about, okay, this type of person at this life stage with this income, this many kids, lives in this area, whatever. What are other life challenges that they are facing right now? What are the things that are bothering them when they go to bed at night? If you're a financial podcaster, let's just say you're a financial advisor, they may not go to bed thinking about like, oh, have I saved enough for retirement? That may not be the clear thought in their mind. That may be related down the road, right? But they may be thinking about, how am I going to help my parents as they age and put my kid through college and this and that, and do we even need to keep this big house, and then what that all boils down to is, will I have enough for retirement? So using that example, if you can back up and speak to those topics that I just kind of listed off right there, you're addressing life stage concerns, big other financial decisions that they're having to make, that they're probably having to hire other professionals to get involved in their life, especially when you're talking about estate planning for elderly parents, dementia care for elderly parents, anything like that, college planning for their kids, all of these different big decisions that affect their finances need to be addressed. And whether you address them specifically or you have a ideal, like very intentional guest come on your show to talk about those things, you're helping that ideal listener and ideal client walk through what's on their mind. And by doing that, you're further elevating yourself as the go-to financial professional, even though you're not teaching about retirement savings or whatever. Do you see what I mean? So whatever your profession is, whatever your business does, whatever your services are, back up, step out of teacher mode and start to really think about your ideal client and life things that they are facing right now. Worries about their kids, worries about their parents, worries about their spouse or a divorce or their pets or whatever it is, and see if you can address those things. So that is one way that you elevate your content and really connect with folks and draw them in a more intentional and like trustworthy, magnetic way, so that they do eventually convert to clients. Another thing that I see a lot is a bit of confusion around what their call to action should be, which is wild when you think about, these are mature business owners who've been podcasting for years, 3 years, 5 years, 8 years. These are the people I'm having conversations with all the time. And it's not that they don't know what their offers are. No. It is that they have maybe a ladder of offers, or that their top tier offer is full. So they're hesitant to say a call to action because they don't want someone to get into their pipeline and be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm full, I can't help you. So, and the other piece is that in podcast world, we started to hear years ago, like literally 10 years ago, we started to hear like, oh, if you like this show, rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, blah, blah, blah. I mean, even right there, I just said 4 calls to action. So what I see a lot is a wasted call to action, like what I just did, versus you telling someone to download a very specific lead magnet based on the content that you just talked about that will further help them navigate that issue, right? So we need to pull away from ratings and reviews and share and this and that, blah, blah, blah. Like that has no impact on your business. It doesn't do anything. Okay, it gets you a rating on Apple, maybe. But if they've been listening to you for 5 years and they haven't rated your show yet, they're not going to. Maybe they're more interested in actually taking a step to get on your email list because you haven't talked about it in a year, right? So believe it or not, these are such simple shifts, but I even get pushback from some of these podcasters saying like, oh, but I got to ask for ratings and reviews, or, my show won't show up in Apple search or whatever it is. And that is just not true. If you've already been podcasting for years and you've built an audience, that audience is going to stay with you unless their life situation changes or unless your show drastically changes, right? So now the focus is to capture that audience on an even deeper level because they're already here, right? They're already showing up week after week. So now the challenge is to actually get them to take action. And when they finally take action, I want it to be something that impacts your business in a positive way. So that is the important piece there. So let's see. I've got a couple friends here. I see you, Lynn. Hello. Thank you for popping in. Question: what do you think about asking listeners to share an episode of your podcast with a friend? This can be a powerful ask or call to action if you are still building an audience with that particular show. So Lynn, I'm just gonna pinpoint you. I know that you've started a new show recently, even though you are a very experienced podcaster. So you are still building the audience for this new show. So this could be a powerful call to action for you, as long as if you're saying that in the episode, I still want there in your show notes to be the steps that they can take to actually get in, right? So whether that's the lead magnet, that's the book a call, whatever that is, I want it to be really clear in the show notes how they get in with you, where they can hear during the episode, like, hey, share with a friend. That might be great because sometimes people do have a friend in mind, but they need that nudge to share with them. But again, so anytime you're looking at calls to action, think about, is this a audience building call to action? Like share this episode with a friend. Is this a vanity metric call to action, kind of like rate and review the podcast? Or is this a business building call to action, like download the attraction messaging blueprint, right? So what is your business goal and which type of call to action should you use there? Okay, and then Lynn has a follow-up question. Should I only have one link to get them in my pipeline at the bottom of those show notes? Yes, I would love to see that. So the other thing that I find often is that in someone's show notes, there are so many links to do things, to go to play, even to go to the guest's website and the guest's offers. And then the host has like one little bitty blurb at the very, very bottom after I've already sorted through 10 links. Oh, and then finally, this is how to download the lead magnet or something. And the lead magnet wasn't even mentioned in the episode. So based on what I just said, that can kind of tell you what viewers, readers, podcast listeners are going through if they do click into your show notes. They are having to decipher through, which of these 10 links do I want to click on? Do I want to go check out the guest? When really our purpose as podcasters for our business is to get people on our list, right? So just think if that subscriber, if that listener was on your email list already, they would probably get an email when you did publish an episode, and your guests' links could be in that email. So it's kind of like insider information. Sure, maybe you have it in your show notes, but I would put your link higher than any other subsequent calls to action, right? Like make it obvious what you want them to do. And then I just happen to answer that next question. So yeah, you can put their links in the show notes, but I would structure my show notes to where it's obvious that I want you to do my call to action first. I mentioned my lead magnet a few times. I tie it into the summary of the show and like why it's helpful, and then go into the guest bio and stuff like that, like towards the bottom of your show notes. So hopefully that clarifies everything. Thank you for all the live questions, Lynn. That is fabulous. All right, so let's move to question number 2 that I had planned, which actually means you just got like 4 already answered. So that's very exciting today. This is also kind of around the same idea where it's like, okay, I've built an audience, but I think based on, that my audience really isn't converting over into clients, I think that I've attracted the wrong listeners over, say 3 years of podcasting. And so how do I shift from those folks and start pulling in people who actually buy my offer, right? So whether it is truly an audience shift that is needed or not, and maybe they are the right listeners, but we just need to get them to take action, or maybe they are the wrong listeners. I talked to someone recently who said, yes, we do CFO services, but I have a bunch of accountants that listen to my show. I need business owners who need a CFO to listen to my show. So that is currently the strategy that we're working through. So that's an example right there. So what we are going to work through is niching her language around her show and really honing in and calling out the type of person that she is speaking to in each episode. So I want her to specifically call out, like, this show is not for accountants. This show is for business owners who yada, 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 and will eventually need a CFO and why, and kind of position it to where she's really talking about the benefits of hiring a virtual CFO. That goes along with framing the episode to where when an accountant hears it, it's like, oh, this clearly isn't for me. This is for a business owner. Maybe they have a shared client, and maybe that's why the accountants are listening to this virtual CFO. But, that would be potentially, depending on different people's offers, that's a collaboration opportunity. So if that's the case, and you find that you have a bunch of accountants listening, maybe that's an opportunity to reach out and say, hey, if you're an accountant listening to this episode and you know this content isn't directly for you, but you're listening for a client, we might get to work together. Fill out this form, blah, blah, blah. And you can kind of create a call to action to where you're actually almost surveying your existing audience and finding out who's actually listening. If you get 100 accountants replying to your form, then your hunch was right. And you can decide what to do with that information. So another thing we're walking through, of course, is her calls to action, a bit like I talked about earlier, and her podcast SEO. She's been having help with the production of her show, but not with a broad marketing, how does this help the business perspective. No one has come in there and pulled out stats of, when we were saying this call to action, how many people took it. The links weren't trackable. There were all these different things that were happening where it is that hamster wheel where you're just producing and producing and producing, and crossing your fingers that you get a client, but then you're not seeing the action. And different scenarios have shown her that she may have attracted the wrong audience. So again, niching down your content and even calling out who you want to be attracting and who you want to be speaking to, and even repelling on purpose the folks that you don't want. So depending on your type of show, you could say this show is not for a business owner who has no interest in writing a book, for example, right? Like if, like Lynn, she does publishing for professionals. So her show is all about helping business owners write their book that they've had on their mind for years. She's going to help me with my book one of these days. So she could easily call out and say, this show is not for you if you've never wanted to write a book and are completely adverse to the idea. This show is for folks who have had a book on their mind for years and who just haven't sat down to write it yet, right? So you just be really clear with who you're attracting. And then, of course, like podcast SEO, right? Like, is the name of your show obvious and searchable? And would people who want to do the thing that your services provide, are they searching for those words? So whether it's the phrasing, or like, especially I find that if your title is like clever or cheeky, people don't think to search for that term when they're looking for your type services or the solutions that you provide. Then the next thing with podcast SEO is episode titles. So with a backlog of hundreds of episodes, I'm going to be sifting through these client shows and looking at keywords that I see that the show should be using. And do these keywords and key phrases exist in any of the past, let's say, 50 episode titles? How often? How many? Do any of these keywords speak to the exact ideal client that they want to attract? How often does that appear? How many times, right? And so when you start to pull that type of data of what should be happening versus what has been happening, you can get really meticulous about, okay, we need an episode where this key phrase is going to be in the title, and the episode is obviously also about this topic, right? Because we want to be telling the truth. We don't want clickbaity titles. So that is a really good strategy if you are kind of not sure about what to create next, or you feel like you're running out of topics. Take a look at your keywords that either are for your business or that you intended to be using for your podcast, and search back over your episode titles. How often are those keywords appearing? And if not, we need to be intentional about going forward using those keywords. So, okay, Lynn, thank you for being with me today. Take care. She has to head out early. All right, so for the rest of the folks here, we've got a few more questions. I'm going to try to run through them a little more quickly. Even just in the few that I've answered, I think you've gotten about 6 questions answered already today. So you can take the examples and apply them to your business. And even just talking through these few questions, I think I've given you a lot of ideas about how to look at your podcast differently, and even content creation going forward, how to be really intentional about those topics, the niche, who you're calling out, and your calls to action. So that's a lot right there. I mean, I've already given you homework, okay? So here's the next thing. Kind of goes, I feel like I wouldn't have to answer this one, but I do get this often. Do I just need to publish more episodes, like faster, like more? Like if I'm only doing only a weekly show right now, do I need to go to twice a week? Do I need to go to every day? Or am I fine staying at weekly, but I just really need to be more strategic? I'm going to go with the strategic route. I am not about just pushing on the gas in an aimless direction without really also being able to be intentional. Now, if you have been able to take some time off, you've been able to go through the keywords like we were talking about, you've been able to rework your CTA, and you have a lot like mapped out, and it is so solid for your ideal client, and then you want to hit the ground running and you want to do a daily show for the first quarter, and you have it all strategically planned out, that could be amazing, right? Like that's the combination of strategy and higher frequency. For most people, that doesn't make any sense. That would never work. You would stress yourself out, you would burn out, and you would end up kind of dampening the strategic part and just ending up on like a crazy hamster wheel. So typically, a weekly or even every other week show is enough for a business owner to attract clients and to get business from their podcast if their show is ultra strategic. I'm talking content, guests, call to action, visuals, show notes, repurposing. If every step of the way is really strategic and we're posting at certain places and certain times in where a certain audience is, sharing in a certain way to attract that ideal client, you do not need more episodes. You just need to really lean into the strategic piece. And if every step is intentional, that's going to make an impact. Okay, what should listeners be invited to do after an episode without sounding salesy? So that's a big concern that I've seen for years. So we talked all about your call to action and how to structure that, but then there's this concern about being salesy. So some of this is a mindset shift, and some of it is the way you phrase your offer. So if you phrase your offer leading with the benefits of how it helps the person, and if it solves their problem, right? They're searching for that. They want nothing more than this solution, even if they don't quite know what the solution is. So if you're phrasing your call to action, leading with benefits, leading with solutions, talking about the transformation of how they feel now versus how they feel after they work with you, that is going to be more attractive to your ideal client. And you as the business owner, if you're speaking truth about this, you're not selling snake oil. You are truly offering this transformation as a service, right? So maybe sometimes it has to do with like practicing your phrasing, getting dressed up and looking in the mirror and running through a script a few times and tweaking that script until it feels natural and truthful, and that you would actually say it if you were introducing yourself to someone and like what you do in your business. So it's kind of the elevator pitch thing, but it really, if you lead with benefits and you are sharing in your call to action the like easiest baby step that they can take to get involved with your business, which usually it is a lead magnet of some sort and they're joining your email list, and then the actual sale happens later. That will, especially with practice, come out without sounding salesy. So for those of you watching right now, if I invited you because you maybe have other very specific questions to a podcast clarity call, that's me offering you a solution. That doesn't feel salesy on my part. But yet we both know that something could happen after that podcast clarity call, right? Like maybe we walk through your questions and I say, actually, this particular service of mine will really help you. It'll solve this, this, and this for you, and, relieve these worries. I can offer that podcast clarity call with confidence because I am absolutely confident about my services. So it doesn't feel salesy to say, hey, go to talktovirginia.com and book a podcast clarity call. I am confident in that transformation that I'm going to be able to offer there. So that's what I want you to do, is write out what you would ask them to do, and then go in the mirror and say it to yourself and practice it. Tweak your script until it feels natural, and lean into the benefits and transformation that you would provide, and like why you are wanting people to buy this thing or download this lead magnet or anything. Elisa's here with us today. Hello, Elisa. I'm so happy to see you. Is there a length of podcast that works better for different audiences? Absolutely. So again, this does require some insight into your ideal client, and you want to think about what we were talking about at the top of the call. So life stage, things they're dealing with, whether they work corporate or they work and they're on their own businesses, so maybe they don't have a commute. Are they fit people? Are they spending time like in the gym or out for a run, where that's maybe their favorite time to tune into a podcast? So you try to identify their lifestyle. Most people, I don't care how busy they are, they can plug in for 20 to 40 minutes at a time. That's a really good like mid-range length episode. Whether it is going to the grocery store, whether it's out for a run or walking the dog, whether it's doing dishes, whether it is relax time after the kids go to bed, like whatever thing you want to do when you listen to that podcast. Most people will have 20 to 40 minutes in a day that they can listen to a show. So, and then the other thing that comes up is that podcast listeners really love podcasts. So your show is not the only one they're listening to each week. Typically, when they find a new show that they like, they just add it to their schedule. So let's say they already have 5 shows they love. Your show comes up. Okay, awesome. It's 30 minutes. It comes out on Thursdays. On Thursdays, I, walk the dog at 7 a.m. And this is my new listening tool while I'm walking my dog, right? And the other days I listen while I have my kid at soccer practice or like whatever, right? So sometimes we are seeing that the very large creators, so I'm thinking about what is it, like Armchair, whatever that is, Dax Shepard and Joe Rogan and some of those other like big creators that have been doing this for a long time, their shows are like hours long. Okay. I personally do not have time for that. I will never digest that entire episode. I personally am much more interested in either like a 10 to 20 minute episode. Those mid-range episodes, like 20 to 40 minutes, work great depending on what I'm doing. Or sometimes my kid is at soccer practice for an hour and a half, multiple days a week, and I'm walking the track. And so an hour and a half episode actually does work great for me, or I can do 2 back to back of like the shorter episodes. So that's just me. But just think about if anything that I said and shared about my life and my schedule is something that works for your clients as well. If you think, gosh, I really want to listen to this episode and I just don't have time, I could put on an episode like out loud in my dressing area where I'm getting ready for the day and just listen to that while I'm doing my makeup. So yeah, I only listen to Joe Rogan when I have a long drive, like 5 hours. Yes, exactly. Nobody in their right mind has that much time to listen to that consistently, unless they're like breaking it up and listening to pieces of it all week. So that is my advice there as far as length of episode. Believe it or not, that is still a question I get all the time. New podcasters, experienced podcasters, very mature podcasters are always still trying to think about how long should my episodes be. The ultimate answer is a combination of your ideal client's lifestyle, because you want to kind of like fit your show into what they need because you're trying to attract them into your business. What works for you, for your creator lifestyle, creativity, business owner life, right? Like if you only have time once a month to record episodes and you've got one day set aside, your episodes are going to have to be 30 to 40 minutes so that you can stack them all day and have breaks in between and have energy to get through recording 5 episodes once a month, right? So you got to think about yourself in this length planning conversation. And then the other big thing is any kind of listener feedback. So inside your Apple Podcasts account, you can see on episodes where the majority of listeners drop off, or if several of them actually stay for the full episode. If you have a lot of data and like a big backlog, you can look at that information and see where people drop off. If you're consistently seeing that they drop off at the 20-minute mark, but you have 40-minute episodes, that could be an indication to shorten some of your episodes. Again, I would always go off of like a survey or some harder data before I made a big change in my show. But you can't, let's say you had a 40-minute show, but you adjusted it down to 35 minutes and you saw higher completion rates. Okay, so what happens if we go down to 30 minutes? Oh, now 50% of people are actually finishing the episode. Okay, that's a great indication. But again, that's an experiment, probably a certain number of episodes to gather that information. And then, yes, we're making a decision based on data. So that is some of the things that I would consider when I'm thinking about the length of episode. Before we go, one thing I'll share is that sometimes when I'm interviewing someone, and again, it's my show, so I have a bit more control, I find that the first half of our conversation is a lot of, about their life, their business journey. They are still getting comfortable with the interview. So there might be some awkward moments, things like that. So I can edit really heavily during the first half of the episode, because what typically happens is the really good stuff and the gold where they've really settled in. They're sharing what's on their mind. They're sharing maybe something they haven't shared before. They're talking about the back end of their show and like mistakes they made or whatever. And the really gold content happens always, every time during the later half of the episode. So if I go in with a heavy hand during the first half of the episode and I can really trim that down, but then leave and go with like a lighter hand on my editing during my second half of my episode, because that's where like the good content is, that strategy actually shortens the produced length of my episodes pretty significantly, rather than trying to look at a 60-minute episode and say like, how on earth are we going to trim this down to 30 minutes? You're probably not. If you insist on having 30-minute episodes, you're going to have to make sure that the recording is shorter. Okay, Juan is here. Hello, Juan. Thank you for being here on LinkedIn. Do you prepare your guests in advance? Yes, absolutely. So most of my guests now are either someone I know because they're a business that I'm interested in, or a financial professional, and I want them to come on and share what they're doing on their show to talk with other financial professionals, right? To just guide folks along. Or if I don't already know them, they are coming from Podmatch. So on Podmatch, I have an extensive profile of what my show is about, what my guests and I talk about. And within the first few minutes, when we just hop on and we're about to do an interview, I give them a rundown of all that information again. This is who we're speaking to. This is the purpose of this episode. Here are some topics I'd like to hit. Here's why I'm doing this show. Here are my ideal clients. And we just run through all of that information so they can right there start thinking about how they can position their answers to help those people that I just said. So something else that I see often, which is a great idea, is an interview pre-call. So you are essentially pre-screening your guests for their interview. Now, this pre-screen process can look like we're talking about proper connection of microphone. We're talking about, hey, I don't see headphones right now, but do you have headphones? Can you plug them in for me? Let's do a sound check with your headphones on, things like that. They can also be the content discussion of who we're talking to, what we're talking about, the purpose, all those things that I mentioned. It could also be a way to just quickly get to know each other and just get past the chit chat and life story type stuff and get straight into during the episode. So you would say something like, okay, it was great to get to know you during this pre-call. When we meet again, we are going to dive straight in. You're going to have 2 minutes to talk about your business, and then we're going to go right in with these questions. And you've kind of taken the time on that pre-call to get to know each other, get past the personal stories, and really outline your actual episode content. So for sure, that is a fantastic idea. There's actually a live show that I'm going to be on soon, and we are doing a pre-call soon. And I'm sure she's doing the same thing with me. It's just pre-screening me, making sure my lighting is okay, making sure I'm not, a complete weirdo on camera. Maybe I am. But that is always a great idea. If you do not have time for a pre-call, the very least that you can do is to email your guests in advance to give them all the information I was saying. Here's the audience, here's the purpose, here's the length of episode I'm wanting. Please do not tell me your life story or have any of your responses be longer than 5 minutes. And there's a nicer way to phrase that, basically. And you can go through, here are some typical questions that I would ask. So excited to interview you, right? Let me know if you have any questions. But I would absolutely prepare my guests in advance. That will alleviate so many issues. So that's a great question, Juan. Thank you so much. All right, so this time is about to come to a close. I've got one more question here that has been pre-submitted. If I see any other questions in the chat, I will answer those. If you happen to still be here and hanging out with me, thank you so much. Go ahead and ask me anything else on your mind here live in the chat, and so we can get that answered before we go. All right, so one last pre-submitted question that I have prepared for you is, how do I know if my podcast is actually working for my business? So this is a wonderfully phrased question because this is actually the title of my webinar that I do every other month. So one obvious way to know if your podcast is working for your business is if people are telling you hey, I found you from your podcast, right? Most of us are not getting that phrasing when we are talking to a potential client. Most of the time it's answering 50 questions about your services and things like that. What I do as a podcast manager to track outcomes for my clients and gauge whether the podcast is working for their business is a combination of trackable links and, whether people are actually enrolling in the programs and things like that. But we're also looking at other types of ROI based on that particular client's goals. So if, for example, I have a client that says, my goals in the second half of 2025 are to get 2 speaking engagements in addition to this many people on this course and this many people in this course. So those are 3 really clear levels where we know whether or not the show is working. So if that is her goal, some of my questions throughout the final 6 months of 2025 are, whether you're pitching yourself for speaking engagements, or whether you're sending the show to event organizers, and that's basically a pitch there, or what is being done to help you accomplish that goal. And a lot of times when someone says they want speaking engagements, the podcast is a great boost as far as their application goes. So whatever your business's goals are, whether they really are email subscriber list count or follower count on some social media platform, which if that's your goal, I want to talk about that separately. Or whether it's like direct sales, whatever it is, we are creating a custom strategy for that podcast, for that business, for those goals, and then tracking and seeing what we can do to find out if it's working and what we need to tweak if not. So we're looking at Apple Podcast statistics as far as completion rates. We are looking at trackable links for calls to action. How many people clicked on this link? What was the conversion rate? How long did they stay on the landing page? Did they become an email subscriber? If they did become an email subscriber, how many emails are they actually opening? Do they respond to any emails? Are they clicking any links in the emails? Like, there's so many nitty-gritty details that we can get into to learn where people fall off, whether they're engaging, and like which type of people actually go through the funnel all the way and make the purchase. So those are just some high-level ideas of how we track the outcomes. And then, of course, as a business owner, if we are doing all this tracking, producing the episodes, writing the show notes, titling the episodes, doing the graphics, doing the repurposing, that takes a ton off of your plate as the business owner. And that is one of the biggest benefits to Podcast Abundance and our services that we offer, because when you're a solo practitioner, or even if you have a team, but you're handling all of this podcasting stuff yourself, it's really natural and normal to just get lost in the grind of just producing and, oh my gosh, I got to edit this one. It goes live this week, blah, blah, blah. And that's how you actually lose focus of the strategy or business goals, or whether the podcast is working. So when you have my team behind you and we're doing all of those things for you, that really frees up your mental space, your creativity, and it allows you to think like, oh, wait, is that a trackable link? Oh, when I said this, was it phrased properly? And it allows you to have that free mental space to be strategic and to think creatively, not just about your content, but about the way that you're positioning your business's services and your calls to action and all of that. So with that being said, thank you so much for being here. We are at the end of our time. If you see this, watched this, enjoyed this, thank you again for being here. I want to invite you to a podcast clarity call where you can ask me your questions directly in a one-on-one situation, and we can talk about your show specifically. This is one of the most fun things that I get to do, is talk with other business owners about their podcast and get their questions answered. And from there, whether you choose to do service with us or not, that's okay. But that call is positioned to give you clarity and to know your next steps, whether you choose to take them on your own or whether you choose to enroll in some of our services. So you can go to talktovirginia.com and book a podcast clarity call with me. You can use that same link at talktovirginia.com to book a podcast fit check if you are a business owner that does not have a podcast yet and who's interested in maybe starting one, but you're trying to think about like, well, how do I do this? And is my business ready for this? And what positioning would the podcast have for the business? So that's the podcast fit check. And that is purely where we are just looking at your business, giving you some tips and saying like, yes, your business is ready for a podcast, or no, it's not. Do these couple things and let's talk in a month. So thank you for being here today. Again, to book any call with me, it's at talktovirginia.com. And I'll see you next month for some more Q&A. If you think of questions in the meantime, send me an email. Take care, guys. Thank you so much for being here.